Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and coming at you with a non-live Lightforge.
No, live from TwitchCon. This is Merps.
Yeah, I can't really pull that off. I am at TwitchCon, or rather, you will be listening to this on Monday, so I will be on a plane heading back after enjoying a lovely experience at TwitchCon.
On the time we're normally streaming this live to an audience, Merps will be at TwitchCon, and it's gonna be fun. I'm kind of jealous, but this is pre-recorded on Wednesday night, so things that have happened in between Wednesday and Sunday, we don't know about yet.
No. But we did pick a very good night to pre-record this because as we were discussing what we wanted the Lightforge to be about this afternoon, changes came out. So Blizzard in their latest sort of post
changes.
They basically said that they are going to be changing quite a few core cards. And these are cards that have sort of
high impact in the arena cards.
Right. Very high impact. Obviously, they are geared towards constructed play, but these are cards that are drafted quite a bit in the arena. So
here's the 30-second explanation about Blizzard's nerfs. This is for constructed, not for arena, but because cards are changing, arena is going to be affected, and they're for classic cards for the most part. And they're for classic cards because they're starting to edge into design space. Blizzard made this card game, and it was very good at making a card game accessible to people, but not very good at making a balanced card game. They were okay at it. They're better at making a balanced card game now. Their balanced team is like 5 times the size it used to be, and they all have much more experience with it, and they realized that, frankly, some of the cards they printed before were just wrong. Like they were just flat out like, why did you do that? And it was getting in the way of them being able to make new fair cards without things dominating the meta. So they started to. I think this is very good. I think the reaction overall from what I've seen on the internet is just overwhelmingly positive, and you'll see why when we see these card changes. Not a single one of these changes will you look at and go like, why? Why did that happen? That was totally okay.
There's no starving buzzard here.
There's no starving buzzard, exactly. This is all like, okay, I can see it. You know, cards they nerfed a little too hard are just a little too hard, right? And the cards they selected are not cards that you're really terribly attached to. Or if you are terribly attached to, it's probably for the wrong reason. It's probably because they were really good. So balance-wise, they took a hit. But let's get started. Let's just jump right into this. The last time, by the way, that they did a big balancing change to classic cards, which was also generally met with a big round of approval, was in the spring when they nerfed things like Knife Juggler, like Ancient of Lore, right? They were like overpower cards. And if you play the arena today, do we really miss any of those cards? Like, is anyone sitting there being like, I wish Ancient of Lore was what it was, or like, oh man, I miss Force of Nature?
Yeah, I mean, like that was definitely sort of an update that we really didn't feel, right? Knife Juggler was good, and it was a premium rare, but that was basically it. Ancient of Lore was, it's an epic, so you won't see it that often. Blade Flurry, which had huge implications for constructed.
Yep.
That was like a card that you did draft in the arena, and now it is a never draft.
Yep.
Right. But other than that, like Blade Flurry was always one of those cards in which if you had a Tinkers plus a Blade Flurry or something, you could do something with that.
Like the Blade Flurry was like a really balanced card in the arena, but no one missed it because it was always something Rogue was like hard pressed to do, right? Like we focus on weaknesses, and Blizzard also focused a lot of their discussion on how classes need weaknesses. And one of Rogue's weaknesses is getting rid of lots of things at once, which is why they have Dark Iron Skulker. No, which is why Dark Iron Skulker is a broken card. Dark Iron Skulker, I'll get on a rant about that some other time. But that aside, it's good for the Rogue to have that hit. And Knife Juggler, which I think was the biggest change from that round of changes for the arena. We see it today. It's still played, and it feels like an okay card, right? We don't even rate it that terribly low because it's a functional 2-drop and it has a lot of knives and it's good. But it was flat out brokenly OP before. So And it was also random, and it's also not something you really want to see in the arena. So last round changes was generally good and okay, and this round of changes I think is actually even better. But let's jump into it. First card, you go. I will say the card and the change, and you will say how it will impact the arena and how good the card's going to be.
Sure.
And the class. So the first two cards are actually both shaman cards. Let's do both of them before we talk about how the shaman's going to be affected. And it is Rockbiter Weapon. 1 mana. It normally, if you don't remember what Rockbiter is, 1, shame on you. 2, it gives a friendly character +3 attack this turn, which is usually your hero, but sometimes it is actually a minion. It was not ever a terribly broken card, but they did nerf it into 2 mana. Same effect, they just raised it by 1 mana. So now it's like a heroic strike that deals 1 less damage, but you can put it on a minion if you need to do that and avoid taking face damage. So, what do you think?
I thought we were going to list both cards before we talk about it.
No. We're going to talk about card by card, and we're going to list both cards before we talk about how it affects the shaman. So let's talk about the card first.
So for the card, if you want to talk about removals, right? And removals, a lot of it is sort of mathematical. Rockbiter was severely sort of like undercosted, maybe not severely, because the difference is between
not
1 and 2.
severely, yeah.
But it was undercosted at 1, right? At 1 mana, what are you expecting? You're expecting 2 damage in the form of Holy Smite, in the form of Arcane Shot, right? That is sort of your standard 1 mana, you get 2 damage. Rockbiter Weapon, so as the cost increases, there should be a little bit of a penalty, right? And here, the only penalty is that if you put it on yourself...
You mean as the damage increases, not the cost.
Yeah. As the damage increases, there should be a drawback. For example, Soulfire, right?
Yep.
1 mana, 4 damage, but you take away a card.
Right.
And a card is a big deal. You know, less of a deal for Warlock, but cards still cost something significant. Rockbiter Weapon, if you are putting it onto your own hero and attacking, the only cost is some health, right? And health isn't really worth that much. You definitely want to use it as a resource. So Rockbiter Weapon was always a premium card. It was just so good. And a lot of the times it wouldn't even be a drawback because you can just put it on a minion instead, right? You're a shaman, you're going to have the board. So what does it turn into now? Well, it turns into like a bad Dark Bomb or a really bad Frostbolt, right? Now, a really bad Frostbolt is still going to get played because Frostbolt is amazing. Dark Bomb is still very good, so a bad Dark Bomb is still going to get played, but it's definitely disappointing. Like the doubling the cost of something is going to make it a lot worse. Now, are you going to draft it? Sure. Yeah. Because shamans need removal, right? And it just brings it more in line with Lightning Bolt, right? Lightning Bolt basically costs 2 mana. Now, Lightning Bolt, you do have the advantage of having spell power, so now Lightning Bolt is going to be better. But this is, this is still an above-average removal that you're going to draft.
I wouldn't say it's an above-average removal. It's an above-average card. It is a removal. Yeah. It's a below-average removal. I think we could all agree on that. 2 mana, 3 damage, take face damage.
Good.
Yeah. Removals are typically good. So I want to take kind of like the counter argument here, and say that because we all know why this card was nerfed. If you even I know nothing about Constructed, and I know why this card was nerfed. It's because you would put it on like stuff with Wind Fury, or like you would have something like a Doom. What is that card? It's epic.
So they had a choice. They could have either nerfed
Doomhammer, that's the card.
Rockbiter. Yeah. They thought Rockbiter was impeding sort of card design more.
Yes.
And it was too much of an auto-include. You're a control deck, you have Rockbiter. You're an aggro deck, you have Rockbiter. Doomhammer at least forces you into a commitment, right? You have Doomhammer in your deck, and you are going down this like very sort of aggressive path. Yep. So Rockbiter had to be the one that was changed.
Yeah, so Rockbiter, so the reason it was changed was purely constructed reasons, and it was because of a combo. It wasn't like Rockbiter itself as a card was overpowered or anything like that. In fact, we rate it the same as a lightning bolt right now. Like, it depends on the meta. Like, sometimes rock biter's better than a lightning bolt. Very rarely is rock biter worse than a lightning bolt, but sometimes it happens. But first of all, it's about the same as the lightning bolt right now before the nerf, and it's not even that high because lightning bolt is not that good. It's a 62 on the new system. And in the new system, the Yeti's a 56, so 62 is still very good. But still, my point is, it's not anywhere near like the super premium card. I know Merps was saying that it's a premium card. It is a premium card in the sense that anything better than a Yeti is kind of a premium card. But it's not like a Flame Tongue Totem. It's not like a Spirit Claw, not a Hex, not a Fire Elemental, Flame Reef Faceless. Like, it was never one of the best cards of the Shaman since Classic, right? In Classic, where your face damage really didn't matter because all anyone ever did was trade, yes, it was kind of a premium card. But since like GVG even came out, it stopped being a premium card because your face matters. And if you're dealing 3 damage to something, you're probably going to take on average 3 damage, if not more, and that's a pretty big deal for even the Shaman. Like, it's not like the Rogue or the Warlock, but it is a big deal, and it is properly designed as far as a card goes, right? Because you are taking 3 damage. What's another card that you take 3 damage that you get like kind of 1 extra mana's worth of stuff in? It's a Flame Imp, right? Now, Warlocks care more about health, so it's more of a penalty, but that thing's also a demon, and 1 extra damage to something you have to like sacrifice health to get is not like it's not the same. So I think it's actually a very balanced card. It's a good card, but removals are good. So it used to be a very balanced removal in my eyes. And now it's going to be a bad removal. Still a removal, which limits the floor of how bad it can be. But the point I'm trying to make is that Rockbiter was never an overpowered card in the arena. This is a casual. This was not like Ancient of Lore. This was not like, well, it's kind of like a Knife Juggler, because 2-drops are also really important to the arena. But in the same way, right? Like, Knife Juggler got nerfed, but it's still playable. That's where Rockbiter is, right? It was nerfed for constructive purposes. It was always a really good card in the arena, but not brokenly good, and it's going to get nerfed to a state where you'll still draft it and it will still be okay, but it's not going to be like that high tier level of drafting anymore.
And you know what? Like, it's something that I think Shamans are going to be fine with. Yeah. Like, just because they have so much removal.
Right. They what do you call it? The 2 mana removal that got added, the Stormcrack.
Stormcrack, yeah.
No, sorry, 3 mana. I keep thinking Shamans are better than they are. The Stormcrack that was added kind of makes up for it, and this isn't going away. It's just dropping on the tier list a bit. And so, one of the weird things always about Rockbiter Weapon, and that's what made it so special, right, was that you could buff your face or a minion, and Shamans are generally not able to buff things. Like, they don't have another spell that's like buff a minion, you know, attack wise. They kind of do now with like the totem ones, but it's all very totem related, and you can never buff your own face to deal damage. This is the only card that does it. In fact, no one buffs their own face to deal damage except for like Druid. That's kind of their thing, as the in between a weapon and a spell. Warriors only have 1 card to do it, and Shaman's got 1 card to do it that was a bit more flexible. So it was always kind of a weird card to make like the centerpiece of the Shaman, and it was in the Classic set, so it doesn't even make the Shaman lose that much flavor, in my opinion. It's still in there, and it should never have been like one of their top cards, I think. So from all the perspectives, I like it. It's a good change. We'll get into how it affects Shaman later, but card wise, we'll see it take the mana hit. And again, it's a significant hit. 1 mana to 2 mana is significant. I totally agree with Merps there. Like, you cannot understate how big of a hit doubling your mana cost is.
It's just what Blizzard does, right? You double it or you have it.
You double it. Okay. So this one doesn't get doubled. This is another card which people love and I hate, and I'm really happy that it's getting nerfed. But it is Tuskar Totemic. 3 mana, 3/2, Battlecry, summon any random totem, which was a stupid ability for such a good common card, and it is going to become summon a random basic totem, which is much more in line with what these cards generally do. You can think about the Witch Doctor, and what do you think?
Well,
I'll set the ground. I'm gonna just say that our tier list values for these cards as I'm going over it. So our current tier list value for this card is predictably pretty high. It is a 58. It is better than a Yeti, about the same as a Mech Yeti.
Yeah, I mean, Teskar Totemic is a card that on our tier list, it would be even higher if it wasn't RNG,
Yeah.
right? Because if you just average out the expected value that you're going to get out of the second body, it's really high. Because a Flame Tongue is ridiculous. A Mana Tide Totem is so good.
Yeah.
A Totem Golem is just
Insane. Broken.
Insane. It's absolutely insane. You're getting like 5 mana worth of minions for a 3 mana cost, right?
Even like a Vitality Totem.
Right, even Vitality Totem is not that bad. You're just getting you're getting a lot of health, right? That 0-3 totem is going to eat up an attack at least. So Teskar Totemic almost has like a 50%, almost a 50% chance to get you I'll call a premium totem, right? And that is just it's ridiculous, and it's super swingy. And I was actually complaining a week ago. I was like, with the addition of Spirit Claws, I think Shaman is just way too random, right? Way too swingy, because they have Teskar Totemic and they have Spirit Claws, and these kind of synergize with each other even.
Wow, now it's going to synergize even more.
Now it's going to synergize even more. But you know, that's just the synergy between them. They won't like drop this and then get the Totem Golem, and I lose right there, right? Like I just lose the game right there. This just makes the card significantly worse. It makes it so much worse in terms of you're getting sort of a warped Razorfen Hunter here, right? That's basically it. And for a lot of Shamans, it'll be better than a Razorfen Hunter. For some Shaman decks, though, it'll be worse than a Razorfen Hunter. You know, you have to make that choice now, whether you want that 2/3 body and the 1/1 and whatnot. Obviously, for constructed purposes, they thought the swing was too much.
It was too much for arena purposes too. Like, it was always one of those cards where it was like we get mad at like piloted shredders, okay, when it comes to the RNG. And that's always a 2 mana thing, so it's either, like, at worst, the 2 mana thing is generally like a 1/1 or something, and at best, it's like, I don't know, like 4/4. A 2/4. Okay, at technically best, it's a 4/4, but generally, if it's like a 2/4 or something, we're like, oh, look how lucky he got. This is like a 3/4 or like a draw all the cards in the world. Like, this is kind of, it goes over. It goes overboard, and it happens instantly. So yeah, good nerf. I know they didn't do it for arena purposes, but I really like this nerf for arena. Like, for Rockbiter Weapon, I wish it wouldn't have happened, but I understand, you know, arena cards are always at the mercy of constructed changes, and it's not like they nerfed that card into oblivion, and it's not like Shamans were like, you know, desperate for help or anything like that. Shamans, as you know, Shady Bunny, like we were talking 2 Lightforges ago, and we were talking again the last Lightforge. Shamans, you can make a very good argument they're the number 2 class right now. In fact, I think they are the number 2 class right now, along with Rogue, maybe, but maybe even surpassing Rogue. But these 2 hits are going to hurt the Shaman, right? They're 2 of the common cards. They're 2 better than Yeti common cards, or like around where Yeti is common cards, and they're both getting nerfed significantly. So it will make Shaman more fun to play for me, because I don't like this randomness, and I'm okay with all the other Shaman cards. They're still a very powerful class, but it does weaken it, and I think that's undeniable. And when you weaken 2 like common class cards, remember class cards appear twice as much in the offering rates as non-class cards, and these are like almost always picks. You're going to seriously affect the how good the class is. So yeah, so I think we can pretty convincingly say that Shaman's going to take a hit, which is good in a way, because Shaman was getting a little too good and too random, and now it's going to get a little less good and a little less random. And of course, every time I say too good, I'm in the perspective of like all 9 classes compared together, not like how close you are to Mage. Mage, of course, is still Mage. But you set Mage aside, and arena balance just got better.
Yeah, I think that these changes definitely, it's kind of sad, because I would have liked to see sort of where Shamans ended up, right?
Yeah.
When all the dust settles, maybe they would have been number 2. I've actually been playing quite a bit of Arena recently on the EU servers.
Oh,
I know. I've been playing on my other account.
cheating on the North Americans here.
Cheating on NA. But yeah, I mean, I still believe that Rogue has a pretty strong grip on number 2. But I think Shaman is a strong number 3, as in like it's Mage. There's a good distance.
Right.
There's Rogue.
It's like
there's
where Paladin used to be.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a decently small distance, but there's Shaman, and then we can talk about everyone else.
Druid.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's true. What would you put there? Warrior, Hunter? It's got to be Druid.
I think Warrior is pretty close. I think Warrior is really strong right now, but it's a very hard to play class.
Yeah.
Because Fool's Bane requires a lot of setup. It requires you to protect a lot of things. But Fool's Bane is just really hard. I found that whenever I face Warriors, I'm always just like, well, how do I prepare for turn 5 Fool's Bane? And a lot of times I can't, right?
You generally can't.
No, you generally can't. But at basically turn 5, they could just remove all the stuff I've already set up, all the small advantages I've gotten, and still have like 2 charges or maybe a charge of Fool's Bane left, with them having the rest of their board, and just suddenly flip the entire board situation by spending.
That's the problem with Karazhan. Yeah, that's the problem with Karazhan in general, right? All of your good cards are cards that swing your tempo immediately, and there's no way you can come back. Like, you Firelance Portal, that's like 2 mana's tempo swing, and you just keep Firelance Portaling, right? You Fool's Bane, that's who knows how much mana's worth of tempo swing. You get your Spell Totem on the Spirit Claws. It was already an insanely high tempo card, being a 1 damage weapon like Light's Justice, and you've just made it like flat out broken. Like, that's kind of the reason why Karazhan's really random. And we're talking about the randomness of Karazhan, and someone commented on it. They were like, "Look, I watch all the Arena streamers, and they're just not getting 12 wins since the patch. Like, not like they never get 12 wins, but their 12 win rates across the board have just dropped by a ton." I know I haven't been getting 12 wins since the patch, but I'm also in kind of a slump. I know you got a 12 win.
I got a 12 win,
but it was a weird deck, I think.
Well, I mean, I don't think I'm the best example. I've been playing like non-mage and non-rogue a lot. But
I mean, we always play non-mage and non-rogue.
Right.
The vast
I have
majority
found
of
though
times.
that when I've been playing on my EU accounts, it's really just been auto select mage and auto select rogue, and just what a normal player would do, right? And out of my past 5 runs, I have 2 12 wins actually, and it is with a mage and a rogue.
Okay.
So the power is definitely still there. But yeah, when I play other classes, I find it extremely difficult. Like, it's extremely difficult to break sort of I call it like the 9-win wall.
Yeah.
When I get there and I face people. If you face a mage, you're just like, okay, I got to brace for the 3 Firelance portals. If I face a warrior, I'm like, how do I get past turn 5 Fool's Bane, followed by crazy stuff, right? And everyone's deck is tighter, so you know that if you face a hunter at 10 wins, if you face a warrior at 11 wins, their deck is going to be insane because the changes tightened up their deck, and this is the best of the warriors now. Right, and this is the best of the hunters now. It's not just like before, where the best of the hunter was like, okay, it's
right.
Like, you're pretty good for a hunter, but no, now it's like turn 1 Zombie Chow, turn 2 Glaivezuka, turn 3 Animal Companion. It's this stuff that's happening.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk about it a bit more, because I'm sure people are interested in this too, and then we'll move on with the cards. What's happening?
Okay, well, that was a very vague question.
Right? Is it the RNG? But it doesn't sound like it's the RNG, because you're talking about people who just have really good decks. So it sounds like it's not even just the RNG, it's actually some deck quality thing.
It's deck quality, and here's... Okay, so I think here's the problem. And it comes from the specifics of the Karazhan cards, and also just having more cards in general, right?
Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with number 1, sort of power creep in terms of how much power do you need to rise up to the top, right?
Right. That's always creeping.
Right, right, and that'll always get higher, and it's always going to be tough. And number two, I think a lot of it has to do with your inability to counterplay, right? And we talked about this in terms of in Classic, why was someone like Trump able to just completely dominate, right? Like just absolutely dominate. Number one, you know,
it's the inches, right? It's a game of inches. You get half a mana's worth of tempo here, a mana's worth of tempo here. By turn 8, there's no way your opponent could possibly win.
Right, right. And the lack of counterplay now, you know, comes from, number one, there's so many cards, and number two, you know, they introduced these cards like Babbling Book and Swashbuckler, and I don't know what to expect on any given turn anymore, even from a class, right? They could put out minions. They could do this. Yesterday, I was watching something, and I was playing Hearthstone at the same time. I was facing a rogue, and the rogue played 2 Swashbucklers, and I would look from one screen to the next, and twice I would look back at my screen. I was just like, what the heck happened? One time I got light bombed, and the other time I got entered the Coliseum, right? Like these are things that you can never ever play around.
No.
And I went from having the most dominant lead I could to just flat out dead. I couldn't survive 2 massive like AoE removals on myself, and I was just like, well, okay, there was like just nothing I could do.
And that's one of the problems with randomness, because in reality, you're gonna get it back, right? They're gonna play Swashbucklers and get crap, and totally unusable crap sometimes. But that doesn't really help you if you're winning 70% of your games anyway. It's just increasing that 30% chance, right? Like any amount that adds to it just increases your loss rate. And when your win rate comes back, it comes back at like half the effectiveness, because you were just going to win those games more often than not anyway. So okay, so this is where we're kind of at in Karazhan, and we got here a little sidetracked. Let's get back to the cards. So we dealt with the Shaman cards, Rockbiter Weapon, Tuskar Totemic, both nerfed. Generally okay, a small decrease, but noticeable decrease in Shaman power, I think. We'll get to the next one. We're just going down the list by Blizzard. This is not by Arena Impact, which is why the next card is Call of the Wild from the Hunter, also known as the best card in the game, according to our tier list.
It's so good. There's
yes,
so the change
better than Muster for Battle. Yes, better than Dark Iron Skulker. Better than, I don't know what you would think, like Dr. Boom. I don't know what people think are good. They're like, Dr. Boom's not even close. Like, Muster for Battle's not even close. Coghammer is the other one that's really high. But yeah. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So the change is Call of the Wild, which summons all 3 animal companions. It used to be 8 mana. Now it's been bumped up to 9 mana. Blizzard's rationale and the reason they gave was just, you know, they want to delay it by 1 turn. And right now, it is an auto-include in all Hunter decks, right? Like, you could be Hybrid Hunter, Mid-Range Hunter, or just pure aggro Hunter, and I know, crazy. And it doesn't matter. Like, you will include Call of the Wild, and they wanted to make it less so. And, you know, this, not only do you delay it for a turn, you remove the ability to hero power and play this on turn 10, right? And also, 1 mana, you could do very little, but also, like on turn 10, you could do this plus Blazizuka or something. Like, you could do a lot more with 2 mana than 1 mana. Big surprise. So it's a change that I think is very, very small, right?
Yeah.
Because changing Rockbiter from 1 mana to 2 mana, that's huge. Changing this from 8 to 9 mana, it's, you know, like, look at the fractions.
There is no reason for them not to do that. It's kind of like, they should never have released it at 8 mana. It was a stupid, like, when it was released, I think every single person commented that it should have been 9 mana. Whether you're a constructed player, whether you're an arena player, everyone had the same comment. How did this get out of testing at 8 mana?
The gap, like, if you guys aren't aware, the gap between 8 mana and 9 mana is huge.
It's the biggest gap in the entire game.
It's really, really big. 9 mana, because 9 mana might as well be 10. There's not much you could do. It's just getting it 1 turn.
Wow, 10's worse.
No. Obviously 10's worse. But like, in terms of being able to do stuff.
And
right?
the key is that the hero power, right? It locks you out of your hero power for whatever turns exist after turn 9, right? That's potentially a lot of turns, especially in constructed. Less the case when it comes to like Hunter. I don't know how many turns you're gonna get after turn 10, but it's, I don't know. There's not much to talk about here. It was always supposed to be 9 mana. It's gonna be 9 mana. It's still gonna be an insane card. You're still gonna pick it every time it gets offered. It has basically no effect in the arena.
Yep.
But now my argument to get a card to 150 is going to be drastically lowered now that we've rescaled everything to be like a lot lower. Well, I had actually gotten this card. I don't know if you guys saw in one of the updates in the middle as we were screwing around with this tier list in the last like month. Call of the Wild was actually above a 150. I kind of like slipped it in there, but that was before we recentered everything, and so. Yeah. Now the tier list looks better and it's more easy to understand, but Call of the Wild, it's not going to be the same. And I think this does make it so that Coghammer becomes the best card in the game again.
It'll definitely fall. If you see it as a hunter, it's still a snap pick. There's no epic card that you'd rather have.
It doesn't matter what kind of deck it is. It doesn't matter what your synergies are.
Nope.
Yeah.
You're still picking this every single time.
Yep. Okay. And now, for what I'm going to call the biggest change in the entire set of changes. It is to the Warrior. And Warrior is in such a good place right now that Merps is calling it perhaps the 4th best class, and I would call it the 5th or maybe 6th best class. But still, definitely in a okay spot arena-wise that I'm not even mad at this change. I think this is a totally acceptable change that's about to happen. And it is to Execute. Execute, destroy a damaged enemy minion, staple warrior card, stupid warrior card. It's one of those cards that you're like, oh, it's like a hex. You just mean for the warrior to be overpowered in this way. Cool. Auto include in every single warrior deck ever, except for the warrior decks I make. And it is changed to be 2 mana. It is doubling its mana cost. And I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. We already kind of said it in Rockbiter. Doubling mana, huge issue.
Right. Well, the difference between this and Rockbiter is like Execute is much more of a premium card for Warriors than Rockbiter is for Shaman.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Execute is
82 on our tier list, right. Which in the era of Yeti is 56. 82, like just think of the distance. Yeah.
Rockbiter, like if you just look at these cards, and you have to ask yourself, like if you end a Shaman draft, you never say to yourself, "Oh man, like we don't have a Rockbiter weapon. That sucks." Yeah. Like you forget about it. If you end a Warrior draft without an Execute, you're just like, "Man, this deck would be so much better with that Execute." Mm-hmm. You know, it will be like Execute probably adds like a win to your deck just by having one of them.
Yep.
The tempo is insane. So does doubling the mana, like, is it going to matter? Of course it is, right? Like you are actually doubling the mana. And part of the reason it's so good is because you could just fit it in anywhere.
Yep.
So now it actually takes some planning. It's going to prevent you from putting some stuff down. But you're still taking it. Like you're still taking it because the power level is still insane. Warriors have many ways to deal some ping damage, whether from like a Death Spite, Ravaging Ghoul, Blood to Ichor, or just them hitting into your stuff,
yep.
Right? So you're still going to pick this card a lot, but you will clearly see those situations where, like, it's turn 5, you gotta execute, but then previously you were able to put out like the Bloodhoof Brave. And super tempo out, yep. And now you're just like, well, maybe I just put out my 3/3, or maybe you don't have a 3/3 and you're forced to put out like a 3/2.
That's a key with the 1 mana cards. They're so easy to squeeze into places, and 2 mana makes it a lot harder. Like a lot harder. It goes up exponentially, right? Like that's one of the reasons why like 4 mana cards, great. 5 mana cards, it gets a little bit iffy. It's because when you're on turn 6, you can play that 4 mana card. You can't play that 5 mana card with a 1 mana card. You don't have a 1 mana card.
Right.
And turn 6 is kind of the first turn in which you're definitely able to piece stuff together. Whereas turn 5, you still need a 2 and a 3 exactly. So yeah, so it's a big change, but like I view it the same as a Hunter's Mark, right? Like it's actually kind of very similar. I've always viewed these two cards as the same. And back in when the Hunter's Mark nerf came in, I literally compared it to Execute. I was like, well, Execute's 1 mana. Hunter's Mark has to be 1 mana. Well, now Execute's 2 mana. So, and it's Execute's better than Hunter's Mark, right? Like, you would rather destroy something that's damaged than put it down to 1 and then still have to hit it. Execute actually removes the minion off the board. You cannot kind of overstate that.
Yep.
Okay, so that's Execute. It's 80. It's so high on our tier list, and so it's going to drop significantly, but it's not like it's going to disappear, right? Like Hunter's Mark after the nerf right now on the new tier list is still a 54, which means it's better than the normal 2-drop. It's almost as good as Yeti. Warrior Execute is going to drop a lot too, but it'll be around. You'll still pick it. And then one more warrior card got changed, but we don't care because it's no longer in the arena. Although I do care because I really want this card in the arena. I want to play with this card. I'm going to talk about it anyway. Because we're arena players. We all remember back in the old days of more than a week and a half ago. There was a card the Warriors had. It was not a good card, but it was a card that won you some games. And it was a card you sometimes ended up taking in your deck anyway because the Warriors had so many bad cards. And it's Charge. Charge is 3 mana, give a friendly minion +2 attack, and charge. It was bad because it was heavily understated for its mana cost, and it's only that way because way back in the day, back in closed beta, in the last round of changes, there used to be this warrior deck called One Turn Kill Warrior where you would just like get to a certain point, hurt yourself.
It's still in the meta.
Is it still in the meta? Is it back in the meta
now? It's like
a
tier 3 deck right now. Okay. But yeah, it's in the meta.
Okay.
Like,
you get like the Molten Giants out, and then you charge them.
Oh, you're talking about the Molten Giant version.
Yeah, okay. The original, the 1-turn kill warrior from back in the days. You like damage yourself to a certain point, you get free, because you're a warrior, right? You can really damage yourself whenever the hell you want to.
Right. The one now is focused on Raging Worgen and Emperor Thorson.
Right. Well, they didn't have Emperor Thorson back then.
No, they did not.
So it was, you got the Molten Giant was pre-nerf too, so it was a lot easier to get out. So you got a pre-nerf Molten Giant out with charge, or like 2 of them out with charge, and charge used to be 1 mana, give a minion charge, and you would like end the game. You would also like abusive sergeant it and like whatever. Okay, like brew it back, play it again, like crazy stuff. Okay, so they nerfed it right before release and made it basically an unplayable card in any format anywhere. So they're putting it back, and this is what I like. I'm bringing this up just because I want to like really give Blizzard a pat on the back for this move, which is this is how they always should have nerfed the deck, but they were so unsure of their own ability to balance this game that they needed it out of the meta. Because charge is, as we know, as Blizzard repeatedly has told us in the past 2 years, and they're right, it's one of the most difficult to balance thing in the entire game, right? Because you've taken every single card in the game that's a minion, which is most of the cards, and changed their very nature to make them a removal immediately, if nothing else, and a face damage card, right? It fundamentally alters the characteristics of more than half the cards in the game. So,
the problem really in Hearthstone is that so in Magic, there's none of this would be a problem, right? Because in Magic, it's the defender has the advantage in terms of defender gets to choose what they block with, and also you can react during your turn, right? Mm-hmm. For simplicity's sake, the defender is, or the person who's not currently going is absolutely helpless. Right. Unless it's secrets, you have nothing to sort of stop the other player from doing exactly what they want to do. They can attack whatever minion they want. They can put whatever down. They can cast whatever spells they want. Nothing you can do can affect that. So stuff like charge, which really just sort of bypasses the sort of I move, you move, and then we played this little chess game, right? Anything that bypasses it, in Magic the Gathering, it'd be absolutely fine because you have safety nets. And in Hearthstone, there is not a single safety net to prevent them from just playing everything in the way that they want and you not being able to do a thing about it.
Yeah. But so what I want to focus on is that they nerfed it to make it unplayable, but now they brought it back. charge is being changed back to 1 mana. And it is now give a friendly minion charge. It can't attack heroes this turn. So they've gotten rid of the one turn kill problem. But they've decided to reintroduce the charge mechanic on the board because they think that that's more manageable and more controllable. And I really like that because that was always part of the warrior, right? You had Warsong Commander, and that charge was nerfed too. And it was over nerfed too into Oblivion. And so now you see Blizzard kind of bringing back this mechanic that is a very vital part of what the warrior used to stand for. And hopefully they'll print out more cards that work with this charge mechanic for the warrior, and we'll get to see some of those cards in the arena. But I like this as a flavor for the warrior, and I like the direction Blizzard's going. They didn't, if they had done this instead of what they did to the nerf, it would be a classic example of like not over nerfing a card and just solving for the problem. And so I'm glad that they're going back to more of their original vision for the warrior and just getting rid of the problem spots. Because warrior is not supposed to one-turn kill, right? No one's supposed to one-turn kill.
No, it's the most unsatisfying part of this game, right? You feel completely helpless, and I mean, the major complaint and sort of the running joke was that Hearthstone was turning into solitaire, right? With decks that were, you know, from Freeze Mage to Miracle Rogue, you know, the power of these decks made it so that they just sort of play their own game. You know, they kind of like shoo and swat you away, and then during one turn they just burst you down. And whatever you did, you know, you didn't get to interact with them. They just sort of like did their own stuff, and then you were like the NPC that they just had to get out of the way.
But all of that is a constructed concern, right? That's not an arena concern, and arena has been, you don't notice it because this is not there, but arena warriors have been suffering because of it. They've been suffering because of this whole constructed concern with one-turn kill decks and whatnot. And so all the cool, fun charge cards are being removed from the warrior. And this is why I like it. It signals that Blizzard is considering these cards again, that Blizzard is going back in this way, and they're going to do it in a much more controlled fashion. And in the arena, sometimes you're charging face, sometimes you want to charge face, but you're also more likely to just charge the board, which is what the card's designed to do, which is a cool thing for the warrior to be able to do, especially the warrior, because you don't have actual removals. You just have one weapon. You can only hit one thing at a time. So to really make the warrior be able to handle like the board, you want other ways to do it. And charge is a cool way to do it that's not like, oh, we're going to make the warrior a spell class too with like Mortal Strike or like Bash, right? Like, I hate those cards. Like Bash, Cleave, Mortal Strike. Warriors should not be doing that. Okay, so charge is back, and if you don't think this has anything to do with the arena because it's not in the arena, who knows about next expansion? It's Blizzard paving the way. So that's actually my favorite change in this whole entire thing.
Maybe we'll get to pair it with Magnetor Alpha.
Oh, so good. Okay, and the final change, not the final change, but the final change we care about is Abusive Sergeant, the only change to a neutral card. And this will actually affect the arena significantly. It changed Abusive Sergeant from 1 mana 2/1, give a minion +2 attack this turn, to 1 mana 1/1, give a minion +2 attack this turn.
So, okay, before, when you mentioned Execute, and you were like, this is the biggest, you know, most significant change, I was like, whoa. Abusive Sergeant.
You think Abusive Sergeant is a bigger change than Execute?
Yeah, because it's a neutral card.
Oh, okay,
it's a
that's
premium
fair.
Neutral card.
Okay, that's fair. I was thinking like for any particular class, but yeah, you're right. Just because it's a neutral card, it will. And just so you know, like, we've been raising Abusive Sergeant pretty much every like 3 months consistently for the last 2 years. Like, that's how stupidly low we had it to begin with, and that's also how, like, you don't want to put this card that high because it still requires other cards to set up, but it does so much.
The value is insane.
Yeah, it's better than a Yeti right now. Like, put it, we finally like gave it. It's a 60 right now. It's better than a Yeti.
It should be. Yeah. The only thing bringing it down is the fact that it's a small card, right? It's very small and it can get pinged down. And we are sort of in a meta that, you know, the top classes can easily deal 1 damage AoE, right? But if it weren't for that, Abusive Sergeant shouldn't exist mathematically.
No.
gives you double
It
what
has the normal stats. Like, think about the
Yep.
the Dark Iron Dwarf, right? Which is an insanely good card. It lost a stat to do that. This guy lost
Yes.
nothing.
This guy loses nothing to give the same bonus as Dark Iron Dwarf.
Yeah, and it's more flexible because you can give your opponents the bonus. Sorry, I don't know. I just felt like bringing that in. Wait, can Dark Iron Dwarf also give your opponent a bonus?
Yes, it can.
Oh, that's right. So that wasn't even a point. Forget I said that.
Great job. So for 1 mana, you're expecting 3 total stats, right? You're expecting 3 total stats for 1 mana. For 4 mana, you're expecting 9 total stats. Abusive Sergeant gives you those 3 stats in a 2-1 stat distribution, which is what you want anyways.
Yep, the favorable one.
Yeah, 2-1 is better than a 1-2. Compared to Dark Iron Dwarf, which we all know is a premium card, that actually loses a stat, right?
Yep.
So you only get 8 stats instead of 9. And as for Dark Iron Dwarf and Abusive Sergeant, you think, well, the more expensive card should give a slightly higher bonus, right? But no, they give the exact same bonus, +2 attack. So if you think of it in like, well, what is +2 attack when you spend 4 mana and get a body? You're like, okay, that's a pretty good bonus. What is +2 attack?
That's 4 mana. By the way, that's like 4 mana deal 6 damage sometime.
Right.
This is 1 mana deal 4 damage.
Yeah. So Abusive Sergeant, when you just look at the math, you're just like, this card shouldn't exist. You get way too much out of it. And now with the change, now that it's a 1-1, it's still really good.
Yeah, it's still really
good.
It is going to lose a lot more than some of the other nerfs we're talking about. Just because it's no longer a drop at all. Like before, you can still play it on turn 1 if you're going first and your opponent doesn't have a ping, or even if they do have a ping sometimes, depending on how aggressive you are, you totally lost that option. You're not playing this on turn 1. It's its ability, and it happens to drop a 1/1 body.
Right, but now you compare it to something like a Holy Smite or an Arcane Shot, and you're just like, well, it's got the upside of giving me a body, but it's less flexible, right? A lot less flexible. But I get a 1/1 body out of it, which for 1 mana is pretty freaking good. So now you look at it and you're like, okay, it's sort of comparable to these more flexible 1 mana removals instead of just being ridiculously overstated. Like you look at Abusive Sergeant and then you look at something like Holy Smite, you're like, that kind of doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make any sense. And yes, you could point that Holy Smite anywhere, you could point that Arcane Shot anywhere, but really, like you're giving you're basically getting what you should get for 1 mana in the form of a body, and you're also getting what you should get for 1 mana in the form of a spell as well. That's broken.
So the interesting part with this, though, is that Abusive Sergeant was like pretty much the only like a Clockwork Gnome kind of, but like it was the original good 1-drop, right? Like without it, your next up, Elven Archer is kind of a spell, not really a drop, but your next ones are like Clockwork Gnome and Argent Squire. So those are now like after Zombie Chow, of course, which is a stupid card too. So now we're kind of in a 1-drop less, like it was an important card because it was a 1-drop that was actually drafted. And now we're down 1 more 1-drop that's actually drafted, and that's a big deal. That is a big deal when it comes to the entire meta and how fast decks can go. What I'm really sad about, though, is that if you watch like Arena Coop 1, which was like 3-4 months after after Hearthstone was released, or you go way back and you watch stuff, people talk a lot about like the 2-attack swing. Because it was classic, and everybody had 2 Dark Iron Dwarves and an Abusive Sergeant. So, and there was nothing else to swing the board. And so all you were worried about, and this is why people kept trading, like this was the reason why, like Abusive Sergeant was a huge part of the reason why Trump originally said trade, and that's why everyone did it. It's because one of the only ways to swing the board was if you left someone's minion alone and they had a Dark Iron Dwarf or Abusive Sergeant, and all of a sudden they got a 2-tempo swing, and that's ridiculously huge at that point because you like at most get half a mana to 1 mana swings back in the day, right? Like today, 2 mana swing is like, yeah, he just swung the board, so what?
You
And
have that as one card with Firing Lance
yeah,
Portal.
right. A guaranteed. There's no. It's like an unconditional one almost. It's RNG,
Right.
but on average, it's unconditional. You don't even have to set it up. There's no way to prevent it. But back then, it was such a huge deal. So you had this game of 2 attack box out where the people who were tempo focused and who didn't have like a kill the next turn would leave your minions up if your minions could not kill any of their minions without being buffed 3 damage, because that was impossible to do. But if it could be buffed 2 damage, it was such a huge risk that you'd almost always remove it. And so it was like a very strategic, like, boxing out kind of game with the math on the board. And that pretty much went out the window, I want to say, with TGT. With TGT, there was so many cards that were introduced that it just became like snowball, get on the board, snowball, control the board. And so while the feel of the game may not have changed that much because you're still trading to control the board, the reason changed. And then when TGT bonus went away and you got to LOE and you got to OG, that reason for TGT kind of disappeared with the bonus, and this +2 box out never came back. And so the reason to trade on the board became aggression doesn't work. Why? Because it's OG, because you were getting taunted, and if you were aggressive, you weren't going to be able to finish your job, and you're going to lose. And now the OG bonus got away, and now you have nothing. You have nothing left in this whole entire gap. There's no 2 swing bonus. Like, swings just happen all the time. It doesn't matter if you leave stuff on their board or not, right? That's what, like, all the classes, swings, right? You can't prevent a Fool's Bane. Leaving him with stuff on the board doesn't make you better prepared for a Fool's Bane. It just, like, everything's falling away. All the guardrails that were what made good Arena players consistent and consistently good, the things that we thought about when it came to the board and all that, just gradually went away. And they were always replaced by something until Karazhan, where they were replaced by nothing but RNG cards and like high tempo swing RNG cards. And so, again, I'm tying this together where this is the kind of stuff. And with the Abusive Sergeant getting lowered, it doesn't matter that much because we were already not in the two attack box out, but it made me nostalgic of like back in the day where you knew what to expect, and you knew to expect the Abusive Sergeant and the Dark Iron Dwarf. Because together, they did one thing, and that was the thing you always played around, if you knew your way around the arena.
Yep.
And it's just not there anymore. Okay.
So, Abusive Sergeant, it's going to be the biggest change overall because it is a neutral card.
Mm-hmm. Okay, neutral common. Okay, so the last change is to how Yogg-Saron Hope's End interacts. Before, you cast all the spells. Now, if a spell kills Yogg-Saron, it stops.
So it's going to stop after like the 5th spell.
Yeah, which affects the arena in no way, shape, or form at all, because no one's ever going to have Yogg-Saron. Like, we're not even lowering it 2 points on the tier list for this change. Nothing's going to happen to it. So those are all the changes, and you know, I actually came into this and I said there's not that many changes. We're not going to have that much to talk about. We're going to need another topic. So that's why if you're watching this on YouTube, we have it on the outline, another topic. But we're not going to do that because we talk way too much about this.
We do.
Let's go directly into the question from the GOAT. Question from the GOAT.
Sure. The question from the GOAT, you know, this isn't like brand spanking new news. But if you guys keep up with sort of the arena happenings and the arena meta in China, what Blizzard has done in China is they have basically provided a lot more stats, and they provided these sort of competitions. And many months ago, they basically challenged the arena players in China to see who can get the most 12 wins in 1 month, right? And they would have a leaderboard, and they would publish the leaderboard, and they would give out prizes as well. And recently they changed it to whoever would have the highest average after the month. So instead of basically just spamming decks, and you know, if you could just retire them if you have a bad deck, and then trying to play as fast as you can to accumulate as many 12s. Now you're trying to go for, you know, the methodical, squeeze out every drop a value from a deck and try to see if you could get the highest average. So the question is sort of, we obviously don't have anything close to that over here. What do you think? Like, do you want them to bring that over here? I know that like we've talked about it with some streamers, but we've been seeing it actually implemented in another region. Like this isn't something that Blizzard just totally has no experience with anymore.
Well, Blizzard has no experience with it.
Sure, Blizzard has no experience, but
NetEase in China is the one doing this.
Right. But
so okay, I see the direction of this. So the thing about Blizzard right now at this point in the arena is that they still care that arena balance is the most important. And let's be honest, people are like, when people complain about stuff, they complain about arena balance way louder than other stuff because it actually affects the substance of the game. But Blizzard's having a problem, and I don't know if their numbers are showing this because they obviously have the numbers, but just from my general sense of like the Reddit, talking to people, the game is going through a downward trend. Like since OG, I feel like in terms of its popularity, and in terms of how excited people are for things, and definitely with Karazhan, I think the effect was probably less than what Blizzard wanted and what they're used to getting from when they publish a new expansion. And that's not really, Hearthstone's fault. It's been around for 2.5 years. Gamers' attention spans are very short. But if Hearthstone is trying to be the game that people keep coming back to for like 1 decade, 2 decades, like World of Warcraft just got another expansion, right? Like, and it has the potential to do that, they need to up their game. And I think they're finally getting to the point where they were just trying not to rock the boat too much. Like, remember all the changes that were coming? It was all about not rocking the boat too much and just giving you little incremental changes and fixing things that were broken. I think they're at the point now where they not only will benefit the most from the innovation, but they need it. Because there hasn't been true innovation in this game since the Inspire mechanic, and that was even small potatoes compared to what they could do with this game. Brawl was huge, right? And that probably extended the life of the game for casual players by a long, long time. And they don't even need to go that far because Brawl actually requires them to develop new brawls every single week, right? Or recycle stuff. It's a pretty big commitment. There's some low-hanging fruit for Blizzard to touch right now, and this NetEase thing is it's one of them. And Blizzard probably wants to implement it in a better way, and I trust that when Blizzard does implement some kind of leaderboard or some kind of way to track arena progress, that it will be better than what NetEase has done already. And I don't think it's that far off. I want to say I expect something by the beginning of summer next year, which maybe that's too far off for some people. But what I'm saying is we're not going to wait another 2 years without this happening, because from a business perspective, from just a general I am a game developer thing, the game has gotten to the point in which it needs these types of innovations, and we already saw it when it comes to constructed with the standard and wild format, and we already are seeing it with the emergency arena patching. So I think it's going to happen, and I don't think we have to even wait 1 more year for it. I think it'll be close to a year, but not 1 more year.
Yeah, I think they need to do something. And this is sort of the easiest way to change up the arena, right? Not change up the substance of the arena, just change the presentation of it. Or
change the goals. I always say, have more achievements. You know how to extend the life of a game for me? Just add another slate of achievements. I'll be hooked for another until you run out and I have more things to do. Even if they're stupid achievements. As long as there's a way for me to put it on my wall or whatever, my virtual wall of my profile, which by the way we still don't have from Blizzard. That's the weirdest thing, all right? Diablo came out with that 2 months after release. StarCraft had it near instantly. The Overwatch is releasing the stats to everybody. Anyone with the API can like get everyone's stats, and so third parties have been filling in. But like Hearthstone said they would release an API. God knows, like more than a year ago, like about a year ago actually. I think they said that, and they never did it, as far as I know. It's just they're falling behind other Blizzard products at something that's like very basic. Like, don't you want to show your friends your collection? Right? Isn't that like a thing people like to do? I don't know, right? I never have the urge to show people my card collection. Every now and then someone on stream asks me, and I'm like, oh, I guess people could be interested in this. Let's flip through. And I see like a million new cards I've gathered from like the last billion arena runs I did that I never looked at. Because I don't care about that stuff. That's not what does it for me when it comes to Hearthstone. But I feel like a ton of people, the majority of people, will be interested in sharing that stuff with their friends and whatnot.
Yeah. This is, like... I don't know. They must really value simplicity, right? Simplicity. Right. They must really value accessibility in terms of just you jump in and you're just like, wow, this is such a compact game, right?
Yeah, but you could put the rest of its stuff on the internet. They don't have to be in the client, right? There could just be one small button somewhere that you can click and it opens up a web page, right? And it'll be fine. Like, it's low-hanging fruit is what I'm saying, and they're going to get to it. It's not that hard to make an API. It's not that hard to make, like, a website that tracks your stats and, like, maybe create some leaderboard or gives you a percentile or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And they could, throw in a couple rewards here or there, maybe work Arena into BlizzCon. We're talking about Merps going to TwitchCon. I'm going to BlizzCon this year. Maybe next year we'll actually be able to go as, like, competitors. Maybe the year after that. We've been waiting for that for a while. We've been waiting for Arena or some kind of limited format to be worked into an actual like recognized competition, because we don't play constructed. So I think it's taken longer than I thought it would, but I think we're getting to the point where all the factors point to they just can't not do something.
Yeah.
And whether it's a leaderboard or whether it's something more on the pro scene, it's going to be nice and it's going to be invigorating, and I think it will definitely help the Arena community regardless to have something to kind of come around, to gather around it and to focus on. I remember when the streamer leaderboard was a thing. Like, I enjoyed Arena a lot more back then, partly because I'm a competitive person and that upped the level of competitiveness, right? Like, me streaming ups the level of competitiveness for me because everyone's seeing me mess up and make. I did this stupid mistake the other day that like led directly to a loss, and it was I had a choice between Unstable Portal or playing my Firelance Portal, and it was a desperate situation where I needed to like both clear the board and taunt up or heal. And I was like, I guess I'll Firelance Portal something and hope to like get a big taunt like an Earth Elemental. But then I played the Unstable Portal and I got an Earthen Ring Farseer from it, which is playable. And if I had done things in the right order, I would have survived and whatever. And I was like, oh man, I made a mistake because I rethought about the odds afterwards. And I was like, you definitely should have Unstable Portal first. I was probably going to do it anyway. And stuff like that, right? Like if I'm streaming, people get on me for it. And it ups the level of competition. And then when you track your stats, it ups the level of competition. And then when people compare your stats to that of like other streamers and like other top players, that ups it even more. And it was just... it puts you more on your game, and it makes the stuff you do seem more impactful. And it's so easy. It's not like the Blizzard has to do anything to their game to make it happen. All right. So that's my little wish list. Let's go to Card Good Bad. I kind of want to talk about... this is my Card Good Bad, where we tell you whether a card is good or bad. And since we updated the tier list, one of the changes, and this has been around for like we lowered Azure Drake, like 3 weeks ago. I've been asked about this so many times since then that I kind of just want to address it on the Lightforge. In case you went to the Lightforge.com tier list and was like, there are so many changes, but the one that convinces me that the old tier list was better, or that, I don't know what you guys are doing or whatever, is probably Azure Drake, at least from the feedback I've been getting. And we now have Azure Drake, just to give you some kind of comparison. It's a little higher it's like 2 points higher for some classes that use the spell damage a lot better. But generally speaking, and it's 2 points worse for some classes like the Warrior, who don't use the spell damage. But generally speaking, Azure Drake is at 56. Remember we were talking about Yetis? Yeti's at 56. Azure Drake's at 56. If you've been playing this game for any amount of time, you know that Azure Drake has always been considered better than a Yeti. Always. Even in the heyday of the Yeti, Azure Drake was significantly better than the Yeti.
Yep.
And we have come forward and we have kind of put the stamp on it, and we're saying Azure Drake is a Yeti. It is not better than a Yeti. That is about how it is. And there's reasons for it. We didn't just like decide it. You know, we're not looking at stats and saying, oh, Azure Drake is performing whatever. We have actual gameplay reasons for this. And that is because what is Azure Drake for? Right? Like, it's obviously anti-tempo. Back in the day, you may be able to get away with it on turn 5 and be okay because 5-drops are so bad. 5-drops are much better now. You can't play it on turn 5. Azure Drake is nearly unplayable on turn 5 unless you really have nothing else to do. You will lose the board. It's bad. If you're doing that, like as a habit of playing Azure Drake on turn 4, do yourself a favor and stop doing that. You'll win more by playing on turn 10 or 11 or 12. You really got to start treating it more like you play a Gnomish Inventor, where if there's a favorable board state for it, you play it, but otherwise be comfortable holding it for a long time. And that's because Azure Drake gives you card advantage, right? That's its big thing. It's a sizable body that's a 4/4, that's pretty average, and then the spell damage means nothing pretty much. And then it also gives you another card. So it is effectively as big, total size-wise, as like 8 mana of stuff. But you can play it for 5 mana. And already get something out. So you don't have to like anti-tempo yourself too much to lose the board, right? In order to get this card draw. This is not an Arcane Intellect where you anti-tempo yourself by 3 mana. This is like less of a commitment. You anti-tempo yourself by like 1.5 mana. And so that's where its value kind of comes from. The problem, of course, is that in today's meta, you can't really afford to anti-tempo yourself by 1.5 mana. They're already going to swing the board by 2 mana at their will. You need like a 4 mana buffer in terms of tempo to feel safe. Do you really have a 4 mana buffer at any time against your opponent? And if you do, think about how you got there. You got there through big swingy win more cards. So those cards are the cards that are more important for card advantage. For the very thing that Azure Drake is supposed to be good for. For card advantage, you want something like a Frostwolf Warlord. Why? Because that's how you get 4 steps ahead of your opponent. And that's what's going to keep you on the board when your opponent does the most ridiculous things, if you are ahead. And so the Frostwolf Warlord would accomplish that. Azure Drake, that's not going to accomplish that. And they're both card advantage. Frostwolf Warlord, if you're up ahead, is as much card advantage as an Azure Drake if you get an 8/8, right? It's like a little less if you get a little less, but like 5 mana, it's all out there. Azure Drake, you have to pay again whatever card you draw, the mana cost is. And it's also less RNG, which always helps. Card draw is always a little bit more RNG. And so at the very thing that it's doing, you want something that either snowballs off of your existing board if you have a deck that can handle it, or you want something that can help you establish the board. Like a shielded mini-bot-ish kind of thing, right? Like something on curve, something good to stabilize you. Or if your deck is going to fall behind, what you want is something that with initiative, something that can get you back on the board, something that does those 2 tempo swings, that punishes your opponent for playing tempo. Where is card draw fitting into this? It's not. Card draw is good when everything is slow, when everything is stable, when you have good predictive powers about what is going to happen. Card draw is also good if you have a combo deck, when you need to cycle through your deck to get your pieces. In the arena, you're not playing a combo deck. Or, if you're a good player, you're not playing a combo deck that often, because you prefer to use your normal skills. You prefer to stabilize things much more than RNG things. And combo decks are RNG, because card draw is RNG. So you get that out of the equation. And the meta, with how random and how swingy it is really, really, really not suited for card draw. It's not stable. It's the opposite of stable. We kept interjecting into our card reviews how unstable the freaking meta is and how unpredictable it is and how you can't just get on the board and inch your way to victory anymore as consistently. And all of this adds up to a pretty clear picture of what is actually going to perform well in this meta if you're a good player, and that's not card draw. Not like never have card draw. It's a 56, it's a Yeti, it's pretty good, right? It's not like we're saying never draft Azure Drake, but it's not premium. You want a Matter Bomber instead. You definitely want a Bomb Lobber instead. You want your like Fel Reavers, you want your Kodos. We even have a Tiger above an Azure Drake. Why? Because there's stuff that helps you get the board or potentially puts you ahead on the board. Or there's stuff that stabilizes you on the board. those are the things that will, in the end, get you card advantage.
Yep. So for those of you who haven't checked out the tier list, we've made a lot of changes. I encourage you to go to the lightforge.com and check it out. Because when you think of, if you're someone who checked out the old tier list and you remember Azure Drake was like a 78 or an 80, back in the day, and you're thinking, wow, it really fell if it went to 50.
It felt like halfway from what you think it fell. Because the Yeti used to be a 66, and it's a 56 now. So.
Right. We've squeezed everything. The scaling is a little bit different. So you want to look at it in terms of, where is it relative to other cards?
And we've squeezed things so that the average card is a 50. That's why we squeeze things. It was very important to us that the average card is a 50. And so it's just the system now. It's like, there's a back end to this whole thing now. So it's centering things on 50 all the time. And so we're going to try to keep that up. Because I think that's a good way to view actual card value, whereas before each round of new cards that come in has inflation, right? And then what used to be good for a 56 is now not so good as a 58. It just gets to be a mess. For other cards offered to you, a 50 is always going to be a 50 from now on, and it was a 50 back in OG, and then we increased the 2-drop values because we needed to because of the new meta. And that put things out of whack, and so we've restabilized it. 2-drops are now 52 again, just like before OG.
Yeah, and we still have stuff to move around. I know that there are still a couple of cards I want to discuss with ADWCTA, but we're getting there, guys. We're getting there slowly and surely.
Well, not slowly. It's pretty fast. I don't think you have that many cards.
No, not too many.
Do you even have 5 cards you want to talk to me about?
Probably 5, yeah.
Okay, so that's around out of 1,000. That's around the number of cards that Merps wants to talk to me about. But yeah, and if you're still a little hesitant about the whole Azure Drake thing, think of how much you liked Tomb Spider, which is that you liked it, but you'd never take it over a Yeti, and that's Discover. And Discover is even better for card advantage than draw a card, because you get to pick the card out of 3, which you would have picked anyway in your draft, but now you have a better sense of what you're picking it for, which is to say you're not going to pick any of the curve cards in the early going, so you're going to pick a big card because you're only playing it in the later game. Yes, Azure Drake does have a spell damage. Yes, 4/4s are better than 3/3s, even for the mana cost, but you're getting less card advantage from it.
Right.
So, and you're getting less flexibility. Tomb Spider's 4 mana, and we went over how much easier it is to slip a card in when it's 4 mana rather than 5 mana, because 1 mana makes a lot of difference. And overall, Tomb Spider's still worse than Azure Drake, but only by 2 points, which is where we think it should be. And if you really think about it, I think you come to the same conclusion. And so these are the kind of things that we're doing with this. We're trying to make sure the tier list really is reflecting optimal play, and less reflecting suboptimal play or preconceived notions. It's why Light's Justice is so high. It's why a lot of these things are happening. Okay, and so that's it for us. Wanted to thank our patrons who bring this Lightforge to you. We are not sponsored by any businesses or other people that give us money. The only people are our lovely patrons and Twitch subs. So big shout out to you guys, and we'll see you next week when hopefully the patch will be out. I don't know when the patch is actually going to come out, but it'll be nice. It'll be not a major change, but I think it will be nice. And before we sign off, I kind of do you have any final thoughts about the patch? We didn't quite get there, and I kind of regret not asking the question within the block that we're talking about for the classic card nerfs that Blizzard's doing. Do you have any final thoughts that you just kind of want to talk to people about Blizzard and the card nerfs?
No, well, here's the thing. Blizzard doesn't do these things lightly, right? If you look at the history of Hearthstone, Blizzard does not like to change cards. They have stated that they want your cards to feel like they are permanent. That once you have something, it is going to stay there forever, right? They want
this is not like Overwatch where every 2 weeks something gets nerfed.
Right. And I totally understand that, but it seems as though, with the community outcry and with Blizzard seeing that, we're heading to a point where Hearthstone is if it's not there already, it's coming up to a crossroads, right?
Yep.
And because of these changes, I think, we might see Blizzard just being more receptive to changes. Because that's something that people have complained about a lot. Like that just Blizzard is not flexible enough. They don't listen to us enough. Like they just don't get it, right? And changing just a few cards makes people really happy. They think that they're being heard. They get the acknowledgement from Blizzard that like, yes, we do care and we're working towards it. It's not just quote on our radar, right? Which people really have complained about. But yeah, like they do this, and then people give positive feedback, and I think we'll see it more often, right?
I hope so.
I'm not saying you're going to see it like every single month from now on, just like with Overwatch, but I think with this positive experience, like this will stop a lot of the like a big percentage of the criticism for like a good month, right? Like I would say a good month, because people are just curious on how
and
this
then the next expansion is going to be announced, and then they'll be in PR.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that Blizzard, and looking at this, they'll be like, you know what, like maybe we'll shift our attitude a little, and we should be a little bit more receptive to changes. And I think they will, just because of sort of where they are in the lifespan, right? And sort of the circumstances that they've seen.
Yeah. Like, and you have to give Blizzard credit for learning. It may have taken them a while, but like one specific thing that I noticed with the timing of this is that it is before those like regional, like whatever BlizzCon constructed things happen, right? This is before that, whereas last time they also did a huge freaking nerf right before, like right before BlizzCon, so that the finals were affected. But they like nerfed it in the middle of the tournament process. So like people who were like really good at these old decks were like, they got in, but then they had to like adjust and play other decks, and they weren't so good at them. And then it was like a whole big thing. And it was a really stupid thing to do in the middle of like the same tournament, essentially, even though it was like a long drawn out process. And so now they've done it before the whole thing has gotten to like any like national attention stage. And you've been accumulating Blizz points and like whatever like the whole year, but like obviously the meta was going to change. This whole Blizzard tournament that leads up to BlizzCon now will have more legitimacy than last year because they got the nerfs out of the way before the whole thing happened. And I think that's something very specific that they did, and the timing was very deliberate. They were probably thinking about these changes. Like these are changes that have probably like been very visible to them, like and problematic for them since OG came out, since there was a classic mode to begin with. And especially Uxaron. And so they waited, as they do, but they have pulled the trigger about a month earlier than they did last year, and they did it, I think, quite deliberately. So they are learning things, and so hopefully they'll also learn that they should probably just change things a little more often as well. They did learn that they have to balance Arena and Constructed separately. They did learn that some cards are probably not suited for the Arena, or offering odds or something are adjusting, right? Like, things are changing, things are happening, Blizzard's opening up. They've gone away from the whole, we created an amazing game with a very tiny team and almost no money. Look how great it is. We are, like, not perfect, but we're trusting ourselves more than other people. To, like, okay, it's been, like, 2 years. Our success is, it's not in the past, but it's at the point in which it's not like we've made this amazing thing ridiculously amazing in the last 2 years, right? Like, I think there's a bit of like humbleness that goes into there, and recognition that we've done okay with Hearthstone, but we're managing the process, and as Hearthstone evolves, we're going to evolve too. This is no longer the first year lock where we're going to just go with the plan because our plan worked once, and we're kind of afraid to like tweak it in that way, like that major way. So I think a lot of, like I said, I think we're both me and Merps are very optimistic about the direction that Blizzard is heading in generally, even as we poke at the specifics somewhat. But this change was good, right? Like it was The balance changes were good. They weren't too harsh of nerfs. They targeted correct cards as far as we're concerned. They didn't terribly upset the balance of the arena. So yeah, positive vibes from here on the Lightforge. And especially when it's a constructed an entirely constructive focus change. It was good. It's well done. So we'll talk more about Clash rankings next week. I know you guys are excited about that, but we wanted a little more time to play everything too. So until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. See you guys.
See you guys.